All right, welcome back to the channel. We're going to look at part 2 today of the best designed .30 caliber rifle cartridge. Stay tuned. So if you haven't watched part 1, go back and watch part 1. And just to make sure you're fully up to date, it's not the most popular, not the most available, not the most common, not the one that had the most success, but the one that I consider to be the best designed. It's just my opinion. We're all going to have different opinions. Last time we matched up the 308 and the 30 TC, and I declared the 308 the winner. And we're going to jump into the next matchup today. I will say last time I mentioned that I did not have the bracket actually set up like I wanted it 100%. So I'll show you the updated and official bracket now. Okay, so last time I mentioned that the bracket wasn't actually set how it was officially gonna be, and I wasn't sure what the secondary matchups would be and all that. So I've officially got it set. I did make one mistake. I actually wanted the 300 Win Mag to face off against the 308 Norma Mag since they're so similar. So I swapped a few things out so that the 300 PRC and 30 Nosler would face each other, which is actually kind of what I wanted. So here is the official bracket. 30-06 versus 300 RCM, 300 SAUM versus 300 WSM, 308 Winchester versus 30 TC, 300 Savage versus 30-30, 300 PRC versus 30 Nosler, 300 Rum versus 30 378 Weatherby Magnum, 300 H&H versus 300 Weatherby Magnum, and 300 Win Mag versus 308 Norma Mag. The only winner we have so far is that the 308 knocked off the 30 TC. Today we're going to have 3 matchups. These 2 matchups and that matchup. So let's get into it. All right, so for today's matchup, we're going to start with the 30-06 Springfield versus the 300 RCM or Ruger Compact Magnum. We probably all know the history of the 30-06 and what it is. Many of you might not know what the 300 Ruger Compact Magnum is, so let me tell you now. So just like the 300 PRC, the 7mm PRC, and the 6.5mm PRC, the 300 RCM is based on the 375 Ruger case. It's shorter than the 7 PRC, it's a little bit longer than the 6.5 PRC. Now, the design philosophy with this RCM is a little bit different than the PRC cartridge designs. The goal was to get 30 caliber Magnum performance in a much shorter barrel rifle, like a 20-inch barrel. It's not to say that every 300 RCM needs to have a 20-inch barrel, but that was the goal. Get a compact Magnum rifle that has a 20-inch barrel, but yet can still give you Magnum velocities. So did it achieve this? Sort of. I guess I would say officially, yes, it did. It did succeed in its mission. If you consider something a little bit beyond the 30-06 Magnum, then yes, it did. In a 20-inch barrel, is it going to come out with 300 Winchester Magnum performance that's in a 24 or 26-inch barrel? Then the answer is no. But since we're comparing it to the 30-06, let's take a look at the 30-06 velocities. So just straight across the board, when comparing the 30-06 and the 300 RCM, you're going to find that the 300 RCM is going to consistently have about 150 feet per second advantage on the 30-06. It has a little bit more case capacity, and stoking it up to its maximum, you can squeeze out a little bit more velocity. Once again, about 150 feet per second. But what if you're shooting a 20-inch barrel 300 RCM versus a 24-inch barrel 30-06? If you look at multiple loadings in a hand loader's manual, and you look at multiple manuals from different companies and not just one, you're going to find that in a 20-inch barrel, the 300 RCM is basically 30-06 performance in a 24-inch barrel. So depending on how it's marketed and how its goals are explained, it could be a success or a failure. If they were to say it has 30-06 performance in a 20-inch barrel, I would say they're 100% correct. Which, by the way, is what the 30TC said, and it was not correct. But if they're saying it's a 30 caliber Magnum performance in a 20-inch barrel, I say, which one are you talking about? I don't see it. I see 30-06 potential, not a 30 caliber Magnum potential. Of course, if you can find a 300 RCM with a 24-inch barrel, you are going to get Magnum performance, and it will exceed the 30-06 by 150 feet per second. So, when comparing these two, from one perspective, you could say, well, it's better designed. It fits into a short action, and even with a 20-inch barrel, it's still getting the same performance as a 30-06. So in that regard, it's more efficient, and it's a better design. And I do think that's correct to a point. But even though it's in a short action, you still have a little bit more case capacity, so you're burning more powder to get more velocity. So the 300 RCM wins, right? Hold on a second. Here's something about the 300 RCM that we have to talk about before we talk about the 30-06. The 300 RCM is just a short Magnum. Okay? It's not doing anything different or better or unique than what you could get out of a 300 SAUM or a 300 WSM. So let's just talk about the other short Magnums here for a second, and then we'll kind of tie this all together, because we're going to talk about that matchup next anyway. The 300 SAUM is basically a shortened version of the 300 RUM, which comes from the 404 Jeffries. Maybe not exactly, but it basically does. The 300 WSM also comes from the 404 Jeffries, just a shortened version. And the 375 Ruger, shortened down, gets your 300 RCM. The diameter of the cases, which I'm going to be showing you as I'm talking, are not that different, okay? So if you put these three cartridges side by side, you're going to find out that the WSM is the widest, okay? At the base, it's just the widest cartridge, followed by the SAUM, and then last would be the RCM. And it's just simply because that 375 Ruger case is not quite as wide as the RUM or the Jeffries case. Lengthwise, the shortest of the three is the SAUM, and you're going to find that the WSM and the RCM are exactly the same length, exactly. So WSM and RCM, same length, SAUM being shortest, and then on the width, WSM being the longest, then the SAUM, then the RCM. What does that mean? It means of those three, the WSM, since it's the longest and the widest, will have the most case capacity. No question about it. The SAUM is a little bit wider, but a little bit shorter. RCM compared to the SAUM is a little bit longer, but not as wide. The case capacity, I don't actually know exactly, but it's going to be almost the same. So case capacity of the SAUM and the RCM are basically the same. Now, in all three of these cartridges, the twist rate's going to be 1 in 10. And there's really nothing else that I can see that's going to make them that different, except for potentially neck length being different. For all intents and purposes, they're all short mags, with the WSM just having a little bit more case capacity, therefore a little bit more velocity, and the other two being about the same. So yes, from one perspective, it duplicates 30-06 performance in a 4-inch shorter barrel. Fantastic. The SAUM would do the same thing. If you were to market the SAUM in that way, it would be the exact same thing. And if you marketed the WSM in the same way, you can make the same claim, and in fact, it would be more so. It duplicates the 300 Win Mag performance. So really, for the marketing to say this is a Magnum performance in a 20-inch barrel, really, to be more accurate, that would be the WSM. The SAUM and the RCM in a 20-inch barrel would basically duplicate 30-06. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's not quite as impressive. It's just marketing. Does that mean I don't like the RCM? Actually, I do like it. You know, it's kind of a dead cartridge. I don't ever see it. But it's a great cartridge. If it's right there with the SAUM, and it's just under the velocity of the WSM, it's a great cartridge. It's an efficient, good designed, great cartridge. But its marketing angle and its reason for existing is not really what it appears to be. It's not that it's faulty. I believe the Thompson, the 30TC marketing was stretching the truth. I'm not saying that the 300 RCM is stretching the truth. I do believe it accomplishes pretty close to what it's setting out to do. It's just not doing anything different than the other short mags. Let's talk about the 30-06 for a little bit. Is it a modern design? Of course not. It's way over 100 years old. It has a 17-degree shoulder angle. That's not modern. It definitely has more taper than these short mag cases that we're talking about. We know why it has these features. The taper and the shoulder angle that the 30-06 has is for feeding, right? Whether it's the bolt action 1903 Springfield feeding, or whether it's any of the machine guns that it was used for, it will feed well because of those features. That, by the way, is a good design when you know what you're going for. If I was going to create a 30 caliber rifle cartridge today, would I pick the 30-06 dimensions? I don't think I would. I think you could do a little better. You could improve upon it by radically changing it, but not changing it by a little bit. You say, what are you talking about? One of the cartridges that Ackley really never messed with a whole lot was the 30-06 Ackley Improved. Now, it's definitely a thing. There's reamers out there right now, and I've even had people in my comments talk about how they like the cartridge. But in all honesty, compared to some other cartridges that Ackley designed that have those Ackley improvements, it doesn't change or affect it or improve it a whole lot. And I know that there's other Wildcats that are supposed improvements on the 30-06. And I'm not saying that they're wrong or they don't have some improvement, but in all honesty, it doesn't seem like a big enough improvement to really worry about it. It's a pretty good design. Now, it came from the 7mm Mauser, we understand that. I think it's probably a little better design than the 7mm Mauser is, even though it owes its part of its design from that cartridge. And how many cartridges have taken their design from the 30-06 and ran with it? You look at the 250 Savage, basically took the 30-06 design and changed it up, and that brought us cartridges like the 300 Savage, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, the 22 250, and then that basic design really led to the 308 family, the 30TC, which led to the 6.5 Creedmoor family. Think about the family of the 30-06, the 270, the 25-06, the 35 Whelen, the 280 Ackley Improved. There's just so many great cartridges. The 50 BMG really is just an oversized 30-06 with a few minor differences. So I've made it clear, popularity, availability, that's not what I'm talking about today, but success to a degree is part of design, and whether you've made a good design. If your design is really good, that could lead to other people taking your design and building off other cartridges. I'm not saying that the 30-06 has the most children or the most cartridges that have been based off of it, but I'm saying it's very possibly the most impactful design ever, and a lot of cartridges owe at least some part of their design philosophy back to it. Its design was good enough for 2 world wars. Its design was good enough to be a mainstay of hunting all across the world on every continent of the world. But I'm kind of torn, because at the same time, if these 2 cartridges came out right now in 2023, the 30-06 brand new cartridge 2023, 300 RCM brand new cartridge 2023, I think I would lean more toward the 300 RCM
in our modern day. I just like some of its design characteristics better. So it's a tough choice. It actually really is. You would think it'd be easy, but it's not. But the thing that gets me is that it's just a short mag, which, considering its contemporaries, its peers, the 300 SAUM and the 300 WSM, that's a compliment, but it's not doing anything that those can't do. So I'm going to give it to the 30-06. I think it wins barely, but it does win and moves on. All right, this should be a good segue right into our next cartridge comparison, which is the 300 SAUM versus the 300 WSM, because we've already talked about them, so we can continue the conversation. It's pretty straightforward. So they're both short mags. The WSM is just a little bit wider, a little bit longer, and has a 35-degree shoulder angle versus a 30-degree shoulder angle. All that does is increase the case capacity by, we're talking 7, 8 grains. So you have 7 or 8 grains more case capacity. Therefore, it can go, I'm just going to throw out 100 feet per second faster. Potentially more in some scenarios, potentially less, but let's just throw out 100 feet per second faster. It's kind of an advantage, you know. I mean, they're both short action, same bullets, same twist rate. One just got more potential. One has a little bit more juice. Neck length, I do prefer a cartridge that has the neck length at least to caliber size, which should mean my perfect design neck in a 30 caliber would be at least 308 length, right? The SAUM meets that. It's 311. The WSM does not meet that. However, it's 298. So it's actually pretty close. In just that one compartmentalized point, I would like the SAUM better. But we're talking about 13 thousandths neck length. It's not enough to worry about. Now, if you watched my 7mm, the best designed 7mm rifle cartridge comparison video, where I did the whole thing in just one big video, I did give the 7 SAUM the win over the 7 WSM. In that case, it's kind of the same dynamic. I would say there's even more of a gap, though, in case capacity, because they really stretched out the WSM pretty far. And I would say it had more than 7 or 8 grains case capacity advantage. It had quite a bit. But that means that they shortened the neck by a lot. I mean, it wasn't even close. It was like 243, I think. And I just didn't like that design philosophy. Trying to fit in a short action, but cramming it that much and just getting it that long was too long because you had to shorten the neck so much. So I just felt like the 7 SAUM was better and just could do its thing better in that short action than that crammed WSM. I have had a lot of people comment that they have a WSM and they really love it, but I gave the win to the 7 SAUM. But in this case, it's not that bad. It's not as crammed. They didn't shorten the neck that much. It's still almost, it's 298. It's almost diameter size neck. So it's just, what do you want? It's a tough call. I'm going to go with the WSM. I just think it has more potential. It's pretty similar. These cartridges are very similar, but one just has more potential. So to me, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to give it to the 300 WSM. All right, last matchup today is the 300 Savage versus the 30-30 Winchester. Now, because the 308 Savage is pretty modern looking, you might be thinking it's a bolt action cartridge, but it actually originally was designed as a lever action rifle cartridge. And it only came out 25 years after the 30-30 did. And that's about the same time frame as the short mags came out around the turn of the century compared to now. It's not been that long of a time. Both cartridges were designed for lever action rifles, though the 308, I'm sure when they designed it, they weren't just focusing on lever action rifles. They were probably thinking it could go in several different actions, including bolt action. The 300 Savage, of course, is rimless, and it has the .473, base, just like the 30-06 does. And I've talked about it quite a bit on the channel. It's just a 250 Savage with a taper in the walls pushed back and given a 30-degree shoulder angle. It's really what I've considered the first modern rifle cartridge. Just like so many other cartridges that we've talked about, trying to duplicate or exceed the performance of the 30-06 in a shorter, more compact, efficient version, which it did not accomplish that goal, but it's still a pretty darn cool cartridge. And a 300 Savage and a 30 TC, which we talked about in the last episode, are very similar to the same thing. I mean, it's hard to see that they're not that different. You look at a 6.5 Creedmoor and you just neck it up a 30 caliber and you've almost got a 300 Savage. So 1920, it was pretty modern. So 300 Savage, great design, very ahead of its time, made for a lever action rifle, but really in today's time, if this cartridge came out, they'd probably increase the pressure rating a little bit and it would be a great cartridge like the 30 TC. So what about the 30-30 Winchester? Only came out 25 years before the 300 Savage, but definitely looks much more dated. It has the rim on it, and it has a 15-degree shoulder angle, a very long neck, kind of like the 22 Hornet, an unreasonably long neck, just how it was designed. That's how a lot of cartridges were designed back then. It was always designed for round-nosed bullets because in a lever action with the tubular magazine, that's how it's best. So it's an easy win, right? The 300 Savage just destroys the 30-30. Well, hold on. For 1894, 1895, the 30-30 was a very advanced rifle cartridge and a very great design. It was designed by Winchester, and it was designed to come out in a brand new rifle, the 1894 Winchester, that was designed by John Browning. The 30-30 is the first American rifle cartridge to use smokeless powder. So before now, every single cartridge was black powder. The 30-30 was going to be the first one to use smokeless powder. Pretty cool. So for 1895, the 30-30 was an incredibly well-designed cartridge. And for 1920, the 300 Savage was an incredibly well-designed cartridge. So how do I make the call? Well, even though they were both originally designed for a lever action, I think the 300 Savage holds up better today and could be much better utilized in a bolt action rifle. And like I said, it's very similar to cartridges that we're still using. So I'm going to give the edge to the 300 Savage. Okay, so you have the winners on this side of the bracket. And on our next episode, I will try to have these 4 matchups completed, if I can, in one episode, and that'll give us our final 8, so stay tuned for that. All right, that will conclude part 2. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. It's just my opinion once again. Next episode, like I said, we'll try to knock out those other 4 matchups and get down to our Elite 8, so to speak. I'm having fun thinking about this. I'm having fun doing the research. I'm having fun talking to you guys about it. So hopefully you're enjoying it. If you are, please leave a comment and like the video. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. Check out the description below. I've got links to several things that might interest you. And I hope you have a great day. And until next time, take care.